Welcome to the Unbecoming You podcast, the only practical spirituality podcast dedicated to the woman who has everything except herself, where audacious, creative, neurodivine women liberate from the endless endeavor of becoming better versions of ourselves and remember that you've always been your own permission slip to be wholly, exquisitely, undeniably you. I'm your host, Kalyani Leela Taylor. If listening to this episode moves you as much as it does me making them, subscribe to join us for every episode. As highly sensitive humans, feeling joy has always required a little more intention because we feel everything magnified, the beauty and the weight of it, the wonder and the wound of it. And doesn't the world feel like a Calgon take me away kind of moment lately? Right now, it seems like humanity is fighting against each other more intense than ever, like it's on the brink of its own destruction. The most important parts of our world and our shared life are being so blatantly exploited and disregarded. And unfortunately, so many of the so-called leaders, with a few rare exceptions, but most notably right now, operate with zero moral regard or care at all for anything, anyone, or any part of the bigger ecosystem and purpose of life beyond their own agenda. And I don't say this to spiral us into despair. I say it because I want to honor what's real, because pretending it isn't heavy doesn't make it lighter. And these are precisely the moments when I feel we need our security blanket of joy the most. Not as a performance of positivity or as a way of bypassing depression, despair, or disappointment. Rather, as our own personal act of radical rebellion, self-preservation, and always liberation. Good morning, lovely. Welcome back to Unbecoming You with me, Kalyani Leela. Grab your matcha and join me for another peek inside my journal. Joy is what I'm exploring these days, not the concept or the idea of joy. The living, breathing, already inside us joy. And some of the subtle, sneaky, but I'd like to believe unintentional ways that we withhold it from ourselves all too often. Joy is not something we create by doing the right things or that we get as a result of the right circumstances. We access it from within because it's part of who we already are. It's always been there, waiting, patient and unhurried, for us to recognize her quiet existence in the simple, seemingly insignificant moments of everyday life. So pull in close because this one is tender and it's true, and I think we'll all feel a bit lighter hearing it. A year of small joys. We are gathered here for a journey through an ordinary year made luminous by noticing. These aren't tales of grand adventures or glittering achievements, but of the smallest treasures. Quiet glimmers that steady us, delight us, carry us. Each season has its own character, its own rhythm, and its own invitation. Together, they remind us that joy doesn't have to be chased down. It's already here, waiting for us to pause, to notice, and to receive. That's from Diane Schiffer in her new book, The Smallest of Joys, which I'll share more about later. But what we don't say out loud enough is that maybe we're making joy complicated. Are we treating it like a destination we have to earn our way to? Or permission to feel joy only after we've achieved it as a reward? Or maybe we hand it over entirely to circumstances. When we have a free minute in our day, we'll feel some joy. When the challenging season shifts, or when the heartbreak is far enough behind that feeling alive again doesn't feel like diminishing of the grief. And what about that our culture seems to think that everything has to have a science-backed basis or it's just spiritual woo-woo? That there's always got to be this validated framework or a certified practice or proven methodology behind it all. rather than simply recognizing that joy is just a feeling we let ourselves have. There's no analysis required, no permission slip to do so. It's really just a moment with our own joy and the willingness to be present to it. Are you guilty of denying, delaying, or deterring your joy? I know I have been, which is exactly why I'm journaling this episode. Because I've done it with self criticism, that inner narrator who persistently reviews everything we do and wants to find it just slightly lacking, or by tethering it to outcomes with something that hasn't happened yet. But what if it doesn't happen the way that you want it or at all? And what about thinking something always needs improvement because you're caught up in creating the perfectly curated life rather than simply loving the menagerie of quirky, unedited, unfiltered moments that are uniquely yours? But this one is big, and I've been steeping in this one on and off for years, and it's the reason for this episode. When joy feels too risky after we've been hurt deeply. If we let ourselves feel fully open and alive again, and then something or someone comes along and hurts us again, we believe it will cut deeper than before. So we remain a little armored to protect ourselves. Which is exactly why this year, one of my deepest intentions has been being fully alive in my joy. No more guarding against it, not just glimpsing it, but honestly embodying and savoring all of it. And if you've listened to my previous episode, you already know a little of the landscape. There was years of deep betrayal and the long, nonlinear process of liberation that followed. And when the rug goes out from under you like that, when someone you believed in, when a vision you held for your life, when the very thing you thought was solid reveals itself not to be, it doesn't just hurt. It's a full-on sucker punch to the gut. And for a long time, joy felt very inaccessible. Maybe even irresponsible. Like if I was to feel joy too soon, that would somehow diminish the gravity of what I'd been through. And of course I questioned, as I'm sure many of you have, why the hell would we manifest deep pain in our lives we most certainly do not want? And I sat with it long enough to gain the clarity that sometimes we think we don't want the very thing we need. And oftentimes the unraveling that ensues is exactly what returns us to our truth, which returns us to our joy. And honestly, I had boxed up my joy and tucked her away long before the rug came out from under my feet. As Lisa Turkhurst says, God's plans don't have to match our plans for them to still be good. And while I definitely don't subscribe to romanticizing life challenges as a necessary path to our growth or expansion or joy, what helps me in those moments when the state of the world or the weight of personal heartbreak feel like they're strangling my heart is to just get honest with unraveling the noise and burning the lies and returning to my wholeness. When disappointment and despair feel real, they need proper space to be honored. And for me, that's exactly what the burn journal is for. It's not to dwell, but to excavate energy that needs purging. To bring it up and out so it stops living inside me as a barrier between me and my joy. So back to my intention of tickling my joy receptors this year and allowing myself to just let the joy flow. I wasn't looking for a book about joy, but the universe, in her infinite wisdom, as she always does, has my back and sent me exactly what I wasn't looking for, but in the most delightful packaging, a book. But not just any book, because there are plenty of them on finding joy, choosing joy, cultivating joy, slowing down to joy, overflowing joy. You name it, you can find one. Instead, the universe sent me right smack in the path of Diane Schiffer, your chubby vintage Nana, and her book, The Smallest of Joys: How to Create Your Own Magic, Your Best Be Enough, and Find Contentment Exactly as You Are. Because the universe knows that every word in the title of this beautiful book is exactly what I've been actively doing for myself for the last few years, to be, literally be in my joy. And that what Diane shares in the precious pages of it is exactly what I wanted to hear and highlight and honor. So Diane, darling, you are more than the world's chubby vintage Nana. You are absolutely my joy sister. And I thoroughly enjoy the warmth and truth you share in your social playgrounds and every page of your book. Okay, this is starting to sound like the smallest joys. Okay, this is starting to sound like the smallest of joys book review. But since this journal episode is all about joy, let's just roll with the fit. Because I am so deliciously delighted by the style, the colors, the whimsical vibe, the seasonal grouping, and most importantly, the magical simplicity of accessing our joy in the ordinary. As soon as my copy arrived, I dove straight in and I turned the whole thing into a creative journal experience. Because of course I did. That's just how I roll. And if you want, you can see how the book looks as my journal experience on my YouTube channel and other socials as well. All the links are in the show notes. And I'm tickled pink that as a pre-order girly, I got Diane's walking meditation with nature, which of course is kismet, since I too include a nature meditation in my Burn Journal micro experience. Synchronicity is such delicious joy. And nature walks always return me to my source and my joy. Hermione, my youngest adult kiddo, and I have been walking our Hollywood neighborhood for 5 years now, at least twice a week. And I still take dozens of photos every single time, because everything I've seen before, I see differently each time. And then add the season changes to that, and it's even more miraculous. And I just love it when people pass by, whether they're walking or driving, they do a double take to see what we're looking at. And sometimes they look a little sideways at us because we're stopping to photograph a weed, or the lighting landing in a certain way, or a bird or a squirrel eating or playing, or just a simple, beautiful flower blooming through a crack in the sidewalk. But capturing those sweet, small moments, it feels like coming home for me. And of course, we just giggle that we probably look like tourists in our own neighborhood. But this is what I call joy recognizing herself. I want to read you something more from Diane's book. It's called The Little Things. Sometimes it's the little things. I've heard that nature is good for lifting one's spirits. So true, Diane. And so I'm taking my coffee out to the front porch this morning. Oh, how I dearly love my front porch. There's sunlight and a fresh breeze and plants and birdsong. And I can feel my whole self relaxing and the joy seeping back. And you know what I think? It's almost always the little things that make the biggest difference. Absolutely. And as we've both already said, the ordinary is where we remember the extraordinary. The smallest of joys are the whole thing. We don't need to go looking for joy. We don't need to manufacture it, perform it, or science our way into its validity. Diane says we are always surrounded by the seeds of joy. And I say we are born full of those seeds of joy, woven into who we are. I want to read one more thing. Mylène doesn't measure her days by productivity. She measures them by joy, by kindness, by connection. And in doing so, She has reminded me again and again that those are the treasures of a life well lived. That every day. So thank you, Diane, for reminding me of what I've always known, that the smallest of joys are actually the sweetest way we create our own magic. And remember, we are enough, and honor ourselves exactly as we are. So, darling, where are you being a thief of your own joy? Where have you decided that you haven't done enough, healed enough, waited long enough to let yourself feel fully, freely alive? Where have you handed your joy over to a condition that hasn't been met yet, and maybe never will be? And are you still carrying things that need to be excavated before joy has room to breathe? If you were looking for permission to feel what's actually sitting in the way, this is it. The world is heavy right now. We can't pretend otherwise. I feel it every day. But joy is not a luxury for when the world gets lighter. It is the very thing that sustains us through the weight of it. As I said earlier, it's our act of radical rebellion. The smallest of joys are not small. They're the seeds of everything. And they are yours right now in this moment, exactly as your life looks right now. So thank you, Diane, my joy sister, for this luminous little book and for reminding all of us that we are always imbibed with and surrounded by exactly the joy we've been looking for. And if you've got things wrangling your soul right now, keeping you from your joy, maybe it's time for a burn journal session or a walk with the Mirror of Magnificence micro meditation in your ears. And if you don't already have the burn journal micro experience, get it. The link is in the show notes. And after the burn journal session, maybe as Diane so sweetly suggests, you simply need some sit and stare time. We can all benefit from a little handbook of reverent reminders on returning to our joy, which you can find plenty of in Diane's book, The Smallest of Joys, How to Create Your Own Magic, Let Your Best Be Enough, and Find Contentment Exactly as You Are. And the link to purchase it is in the show notes. So, my darling, take your cup of matcha and sit and stare while you savor one small moment. And that, my friend, is a soul-scribed mic drop of this episode of Unbecoming You. Wrapped in resonance, ready for reflection. A full exhale until next time. If you're ready to let go of the roles, the rules, and the residue, the Burn Journal to Liberation is waiting for you. No more self-improvement, only self-liberation. Write and burn your way home to the sacred imprints of yourself you never intended to abandon, buried beneath the becoming. Grab it at KalyaniTaylor.com. Thanks for sharing this magical, messy, and meaningful journey with me. If listening to this episode moved you as much as it does me making them, subscribe to join us for every episode. And I'd love it if you give the podcast your honest rating and review and share it on your socials.